Stats SA has a very useful residential price index these days, which I like to watch, and it released just the other day its index up until March 2024. Year on year, it put national house price growth for March at 3.5%. That's slightly accelerated from nearer to 1.5% house price growth just over a year ago, but it's certainly not shooting the lights out. And if you adjust it for general inflation in the economy into what us economists like to call real terms, unfortunately, it still means that in real terms, house prices are going downwards. But the real insights are when you start to look at it by province or region or so on, which they also give a breakdown of. And there, unsurprisingly, we start to see pictures which we've seen for quite some time, the Western Cape province being the outperformer with 7.7% year-on-year growth, which in real terms is positive. It does beat inflation. It is quite impressive under the current economic climate. It's not a boom. I think that's important to realize. Some people talk about the Western Cape as though it's booming, a beneficiary of widespread semigration of skilled labor into that region. Not really booming. 7.7% is still single digit. It's not shooting the lights out. The economic climate countrywide, and even there, is not one that's shooting the lights out, and there's certainly no speculative bubble involved there that I can see. But it's nevertheless an outperformer by significant margin. If you look at the other two major housing markets, Gauteng, 0.7% year-on-year growth for March, KZN 0.5%. So a very significant differential in performance between the three. Nationally, 3 or 3.5, as I've said. What you can also look at in this index is the 5-year growth since 2019, and that's also insightful. Once again, the Western Cape has been the outperformer over that time, 35.5% growth, cumulative growth for 5 years. The national average, 23.8%, Gauteng down at 16.4%, and KZN at 15.5%. So it's a relative outperformance of the Western Cape region yet again. Now, a lot of people will immediately say, semigration. People are going into the Western Cape at a rate of knots and demanding houses. That's part of the truth. I think the first thing is this well talked about semigration trend needs some clarification. Firstly, you might be a bit surprised to hear this, but the biggest semigration destination of people in South Africa is not the Western Cape. It is Gauteng by miles. That is because Gauteng is simply much bigger in every way. It's got a much bigger population than the Western Cape. It's got a much bigger economy. It's got much more jobs than the Western Cape. In every way, it's just much bigger in size economically and population-wise. Its economy is probably double the size of the Western Cape. So everything is about relative to size. There's another thing too. Gauteng population growth is also very, very strong as people migrate inwards. It's not like there's this outflow of people. There's a net inflow of people, and it's very strong, as is the Western Capes. And both provinces' population growth rates are growing very fast. The difference, I think, with this whole thing is that if you look at the more skilled sections of the population or of the labor market, I think there you start to find that proportionally to what flows in, Gauteng gets a lesser skilled demographic, or more so, proportionate to size. A smaller percentage of it would be whatever you classify as skilled or highly skilled, and a smaller percentage of the inflow would be affluent than is the case in the Western Cape. I think the Western Cape, proportionate to size, attracts a better sort of mix of, or a higher mix of higher skilled and higher income people. Now, why is this important? It's because skilled labor drives economic growth and drives job creation. Sure, you need lesser skilled labor to perform certain roles, but they generally don't take the lead in creating jobs and creating businesses. It's the higher skilled and the more affluent and the people with better access to capital because of their affluence or their skills. So that's important. The skilled labor part of the labor force and the labor force with more ability to invest, that creates the jobs for often the less skilled people. And that's where I think proportionate to size, the Western Cape is doing better. There's another important factor to mention. It's about how well you retain your skills. And I think the Western Cape does better in terms of retaining its skilled labor in that region and its affluence than is the case, say, for Gauteng or perhaps KZN and others too. So it's about the net inflow of skilled and affluent labor or households. And that's where I think the Western Cape is doing better. It probably has. I say that probably because we don't have accurate data on all these things, but it probably has a net inflow of skilled labor and affluent households, whereas Gauteng probably has a net outflow of that. That's important too. And yes, so this net inflow of skilled labor and affluent labor does drive sort of former suburban housing demand. It does directly. So that's part of the outperformance of the Western Cape. But it goes a lot further than that. The net inflow of skilled semigrants into the Western Cape has been strong probably for the best part of 2 decades. That buildup of skills is probably now leading to an economic growth outperformance in the Western Cape region relative to other regions. That is important too, because it means that with job creation for locals, their purchasing power improves, and so that fuels housing demand still more. It's not just the direct demand from the semigrants arriving in the Western Cape as of late. It's a superior economic performance, I think, which is starting to sort of gather speed. It goes further. Highly skilled populations or better skilled populations in certain towns and municipal areas means that municipalities have access to better skills to employ. So it's likely that the more highly skilled towns in the country and more affluent towns are going to be better resourced with ratepayers, better resourced with skills, and their councils are also probably on average going to function better service delivery, better infrastructure delivery. That's what semigrants are looking for. That attracts, and that enhances economic growth too. So I think what's mounting for the Western Cape is a superior economic performance, and that's leading to contributing to a superior property performance, not only of residential, but of industrial, office, retail, the whole bang shoot. Even people who are retiring there with affluence, they bring their purchasing power to the regions. That often benefits retail and a whole lot of other things. It goes further than that. It's not just about the demand side. It's about the supply side too. And this is something that's not much talked about. But Gauteng, for instance, is landlocked. It can sprawl out in all direction. It's easier to find available land to spread and to create urban sprawl and to develop property. It's been much easier for decades than the Western Cape, which has the sea on a few sides, a mountain in the middle right there near Cape Town City Bowl on which you dare not build. And then you've got more valuable farming land around some of the major towns, not only the city of Cape Town, but the winelands around Stellenbosch. So land is not being made available as fast, I would contend, in the Western Cape around many of those councils, as is the case in landlocked Gauteng, where you've got very affordable land on the periphery very often. So there's a supply side constraint in the Western Cape. That's been greater, more acute than in Gauteng for many, many years. And so you have seen a greater densification in the Western Cape. On average, the property size is smaller. They've had to cut their coat according to their cloth in terms of land availability around the city of Cape Town for many years. So you're paying more for less house on average too. That's not seen in average house prices, but that's very much that's been around for a long time, greater densification in that city. So these are the factors that are leading or contributing to the Western Cape's outperformance. What happens next? Well, for one thing, what we've seen already is as city of Cape Town fills up, gets more congested, gets more expensive, less affordable, whatever you want to call it, that Semigration has looked for new destinations down in the Southern Cape, George Mossel Bay area and further, possibly even moving into the Eastern Cape coast now to an extent, and up the west coast of the country. And that search for new destinations which may be more affordable or less crowded, or where there's more land availability, that's likely to continue and possibly even gather speed. But there's another thing that might happen too. Politics has become more competitive now. Governments are changing hands and there's these messy coalitions. Some councils might start to get a greater sense of urgency in terms of fighting back with regards to service delivery and infrastructure delivery. I wouldn't count it out of the question that you might see an improvement in council delivery around the major metro councils of Gauteng, and you may see that along with a better affordability of property in Gauteng relative to the Western Cape, just starting to at some point slow the rate of semigration out to a place like the Western Cape. That's possible too. That might be a longer term play, but that's possibly what happens, one of the things that happens next as well.